So I have a presentation, I have some stuff written down, but it is an informal presentation. I should set a timer, I might go over time. But in this informal presentation, I'm sharing a thought experiment that I've had running for several years. It started with a paper from 2012 by a well-known design researcher who affirmed that since most design professions involve shaping goods and services within large industrial economies, this political economic context is one key to the realities of design education today and tomorrow. And something about that phrase jumped out at me. I wouldn't have called myself yet a design researcher at that time. I did teach design still, but I was offended by that statement because I am a designer. I'm from a tiny dot in the Caribbean, so not from a large industrialized country. And I taught design. So I really was offended by this paper that said that that's what design was about. Hamid, you could go to the next slide. So the 100th year of the Bauhaus, the 100th anniversary was celebrated last year, and it's considered to be the start by many of formal design education. And the slightly less well-known School of Design closed its doors in 1968. And both curricula have influenced design education, particularly graphic design, industrial design, and architecture significantly. And their influence can still be felt in many places around the world. And so way back when, I used to think it was nice to be able to recognize some foundational exercises wherever I went. I mentioned this in another conversation earlier. I travel a lot, and I used to think, oh, that's actually kind of cool, because I studied in Brazil. And when I went to NID, I recognized some things from my program in Brazil. And I was chatting with somebody earlier from maybe Colombia or Uruguay. And I used to think it was nice to see all of these the influence of these curricula everywhere. But I have been I've been mentally, I suppose, protesting against that. And I've been trying to see, where can I see the more specific elements of, or more contextual elements of a curriculum, rather than this one curriculum that I see as a little bit hegemonic throughout. And of course, curricula have changed over time, so the problem is not as acute as it might have been, but my experiment has continued. So the next slide. So actually, this is the second curricula experiment that I did. The first one, I wrote it as a traditional curriculum, so it's in a computer file from 1 million years ago, where the first one was a curriculum for, it was like a master's curriculum for artisans in the Caribbean who had not finished school. It was a curriculum where it was a design and business curriculum where we were trying to respect the knowledge and education that they brought to our work as artisans. And then we created this master's curriculum that would have them jump over an undergrad curriculum because of their experience. And this second one is a curriculum that I created also thinking about the realities. This one referred back to that phrase that upset me so much, where I said, what is the absolute opposite to a large industrialized context? And in my thought experiment, I happened on the UN's definition of least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states. So I'm from a small island developing state, and I'm certainly surrounded by least developed countries, and I've lived in a landlocked developing country as well. So what I did here is in the yellow petals, so this again was me starting to move away from the idea of a curriculum being a piece of paper and being influenced by the Bauhaus and creating a curriculum as an image. I started to think, okay, so what are the key issues that we're trying to explore? We're trying to get people to ask questions, make sense, communicate ideas, create concepts, and prototype. In the orange circle, there are some of the issues that they that we need to pull from other disciplines to be able to explore this. And in the green circle, I was looking at what are the issues that designers really could be working around. If you are not from a large industrialized country, what are the issues that affect you in a small island developing state, a landlocked developing country, or a least developed country? Next slide, Hamid. So I started to push my experiment a little further, because the earlier version of this experiment, this drawing was more organized. And then I looked at it and I thought, well, okay, even that whole idea of the circle and the geometry and all that also is a little bit hegemonic. And so this curriculum is a little bit different. It is influenced by Shaw and Freire. And it adds something called critical utopian action research, where the 3 questions are, so this, I call this critical and empowering design education. And the 3 questions are, what is wrong? Where do we want to go? And how do we get there? And then I added Ira Shaw's principles of empowering education, that it must be participatory, effective, problem-posing, situated, multicultural, dialogic, desocializing, democratic, researching, interdisciplinary, and activist. And I'm happy to say that I have actually used this. Maybe it's not a curriculum, maybe it's guiding principles, but I have used this actively to develop my design curricula for about 2 to 3 years since I worked on this. The next slide, Hamid. So in this 4th image, I was looking at, I've been doing a lot of reading. I read a lot of Latin American decolonial theory, even though I don't consider myself a theorist. But in this curriculum, I'm drawing from Latin American, I'm drawing from Latin American decolonial theory, and I started to create the names of courses, okay? Responsive design practice, radical decoloniality, critical making, resilience and change, knowledge of as emancipation, which is a direct title that I've drawn from Boaventura de Souza Santos. Critical utopias and dystopias, because I just love to ask people to think about utopia. Community as educator, where we acknowledge that the community is teaching us, unlearning oppression, understanding our worlds, intentional listening and seeing, critical design thinking, localization and globalization, and anti-hegemonic knowledge and non-Western worlds. And this one I really want to use. I haven't started to use it yet. Next slide. So again, in my own process of decoloniality and understanding that it doesn't have to be the way that we thought it had to be, I asked myself, why can't I just use a completely different image as inspiration for this syllabus or this curriculum that I'm looking for? And so here's another curricular experiment that I've run, where the focus is on developing a design syllabus that is really based on psychology and growth mindsets and 21st century skills. So in this curriculum, again in quotes, the idea would be build your program around flexibility, empathy, creativity, facilitation, grit, collaboration, problem solving, resourcefulness, resilience, experimentation, comfort with discomfort, which I talk about often, future focus, curiosity, and openness. And people who work with me hear me use some of these words because I teach design thinking very often to people who we would call non-designers. And I talk about this being what they have to take away at the end of the semester. They have to learn to be flexible and open. And so it's a curriculum, a design curriculum with a completely different aim. It's not focused on outcomes. And the last image, I believe, yes, go back one, go back, yes. So, no, to the lady, yes. And again, so this is another challenge for me, you know, because as designers, we learn to do things in pretty straight lines and we learn to do things in very orderly ways. And then we have to learn to break this. And so this one, now I am a Black woman from the Caribbean. I share a lot of the experience with African Americans, but I also have a very different Black experience. And I was thinking, okay, so what does a Pan-African Black or African Pan-African syllabus look like, and what are some of the things that we could be teaching ourselves in this kind of curriculum? So imagining Black futures, because as I said, I'm interested in utopia, narrative and storytelling, so we get to tell our own stories, serving my community, constructive heritage, positionality matters, resilience and change, wellness and the African experiment. Can that go straight into a university right now with just that title? Challenging stereotypes, Pan-African ethnography, Africans and the environment, liberatory design and making, and ancient and modern technologies. So that is the last image. And next slide, Hamid. And so none of these images are actual curricula. They are sketches of what a curriculum could be. Because very often, I've worked at several universities, and often when we talk about designing a curriculum, we start a question with, okay, what are other people doing? And so the idea here is that your curriculum can start with really what are the needs of the people in your context or your country, or rather than just looking to see, well, okay, what are other people doing? And then how do we borrow that? So I have a question for everybody, if they could just load it into the chat box, because I love to do things like that. What is important to you in your pluriversal design education? Okay, so I'm telling everybody, you now have a chance to contribute to a pluriversal design syllabus. Tell us the name of a course that's going to go into your pluriversal design syllabus, and we will share the names of these courses in the final proceedings of the conference. Thank you.